Coming up next on Art Rocks, the Baton Rouge sculpture who's turning society's scrap metal into sparse, lyrical steel sculptures that speak to the African American experience.
I enjoy the process of welding because of what it enables me to do. It's a way of connecting things that's instant. And if I don't enjoy the result, I can cut it apart and start again.
And the story behind Andrew Jackson riding high in the New Orleans French Quarter. That's all up next on Art Rocks.
Like the impulse that drives an artist's creativity, Georgia Pacific's 850 Louisiana employees are driven to produce quality paper products for your home and business. Georgia Pacific is proud to support LPB and Art Rocks.
And by Lamar Advertising Company, proud to support the arts and Art Rocks. Headquartered in Baton Rouge, Lamar's 461 Louisiana employees have been helping brands and businesses reach their customers creatively for over 100 years.
Art Rocks is made possible by the Foundation for Excellence in Louisiana Public Broadcasting and by viewers like you.
Hello, I'm James Fox Smith, publisher of Country Roads magazine, and thanks for joining us for Art Rocks. The brilliant New Orleans sculptor Martin Payton creates work that expresses the connections between African Americans and the artistic tradition of the Africans who were brought here so many years ago. Payton got a feel for metal while working with the iconic New Orleans artist John T. Scott. And like Scott, he went in search of a place where the early artistic traditions of his ancestors intersect with postmodernist American work and the undeniable, inescapable influence of music.
It wasn't until meeting John Scott and having him get me involved in sculpture that I began to look at steel. That was as an undergraduate, and I learned oxygen acetylene welding with him, and I continued painting and drawing until coming back to Xavier to teach in, around 1979, 1980. I was really frustrated with painting because of the flatness and wanting to work in real space and with actual mass and actual form as opposed to making illusions of those things. I went with Scott to collect some steel for a project that he was doing. He was using steel plate. When we got to the scrapyard, I saw these I-beams out there, and they just excited me because when I looked at them, I saw an opportunity to move drawing into actual space. Moving from that to the steel, I really wanted to do muscular things. I was a young man and trying to make my bones as a person who was interested in doing art, so I wanted things to be muscular and big so that it was like, here I am, see me. So the sculptures that I did then were made of I-beams, and they were cut and bent in ways that I thought would organicize them. I wanted to soften the steel, so I thought that by cutting into the steel I could do that, cutting shapes, images into the steel, and also bending it, because an I-beam is designed not to bend. From that, I realized that there was still a kind of stiffness about them that really had more to do with my lack of heavy equipment to really affect these I-beams. Also the music. I'm a New Orleanian, born and raised, and that was always in my head. And thinking of the improvisation that the musicians used, wanting to get to something like that. That led me to selecting pieces of steel from the scrap yards that had been bent or dinged or somehow malformed. And those were exciting to me. Those were very interesting to me. And I thought, well, this is it. This is my opportunity to use improvisation by taking these pieces of steel that come to me with a form that suggests that they had a life of their own, and to combine those things to make my forms. Taking the scrap steel, this cast-away steel, and using it to create beauty, or in my sense, poetry about African-American culture, is really what I wanted to do. Refer to cultural resilience to me, to repurposing things that had been made for something else and using them in another way, much in the way that we took scraps of food that were thrown away that would not have been used and created the dishes that are now considered soul food. The way quilts were used in terms of taking scraps of clothing that was no longer purposeful as clothing, but using that to create beauty, the piece that's on the floor. Began by my seeing a mask, an African mask in a friend's home. And it really inspired me. And so I began developing this vertical form that I could not satisfy myself with. It just never became something that I could accept as a freestanding piece on its own. Then I realized that it needed an environment to be in. So I began laying pieces of steel around it. There are probably 150 pieces of steel of different sizes and different purposes, shovels, all kinds of tools, agricultural tools especially. And I began to see those elements as a kind of dense pack. And not just a dense pack in terms of humans like the ships that brought us over here in the Middle Passage, but a dense pack also of the mineral elements from Africa, as well as the human elements, that actually led to the development of this economy and the possibility of the American dream. The pieces of steel that I laid out around that actually formed the shape of the African continent. Now, that happened of itself. Bastrop Bamana. Rummaging through steel yards, scrap steel yards, and finding these elements that sort of call to me. I call them triggers because they really get my juices flowing and get me excited about trying to make combinations or connections with other pieces. I found this part of a combine harvester. A piece of it reminded me of the form of an antelope. Not a realistic antelope, but one like you would see if you looked at the art of the Bamana people from Mali, who have this religious myth that says that God came to them in the form of an antelope and taught them agriculture. Those animals using their hooves and their antlers to burrow into the earth, pull up food, right? That's a great analogy for agriculture. I enjoy the process of welding because of what it enables me to do. It's a way of connecting things that's instant. And if I don't enjoy the result, I can cut it apart and start again.
Martin's a master. We went there and did a photo shoot of his work and decided what angle, because there's only one shot per piece. And every single angle is amazing.
John Scott's presence is directly responsible for my presence being here. Without John Scott, there'd be no Martin Payton.
A professor of art at Southern University for 20 years, Payton chose to teach at historically black universities as a way to give back to people who are often less privileged. Broken Time, an exhibit of recent sculptures by Payton, is on view at the LSU Museum of Art until the end of January. Opportunities to connect with the arts are everywhere in Louisiana. The trick is just knowing where to look. So here's a list of just a few of the festivals, exhibits, performances and destinations to consider coming up around the state. To learn more about these and other events in Louisiana, keep your eyes peeled for a copy of Country Roads magazine. And while we're at it, LPB's Art Rocks website features an archive of previous episodes, so to see any episode again, just log on to lpb.org. Silhouette artist Cindi Rose can capture a person's likeness in the blink of an eye and the flash of a blade. All she needs is a piece of paper and a sharp pair of scissors. So come with us to Houston, Texas to see how she does it.
When I'm cutting a silhouette, I feel the person. I become them for that one moment. It's an instant feeling. The person's in shock. So I'm feeling it, I'm seeing it. It's 4 dimensions, it's not 3, a camera's 2. We're 3, and I see the soul. So I'm doing all 4. I'm Cindi Rose, and I am a silhouette artist. This is my magic wand. I started drawing when I was a little child, probably 3 years old. My mother was an architect and an artist, so I would sit by her side and I would draw everything and paint, and we had watercolors, and then the neighbors started paying me. It would be 50 cents or cookies, but they would pay me to draw their dog or their house, and by 16, somehow I was drawing everything, painting everything, and people were paying me a little bit more to do it. And Astroworld came to Houston, and they were looking for a cashier for the artists, and I said, I don't want to be a cashier, but when I heard the word artist, I thought I'll bring in my portfolio. Maybe I'll be hired as an artist. So I brought in my portfolio of faces, and they said, oh, this is really good, but we don't draw in pencil. Then they said, oh, wait, we have something even better. We have a silhouette artist. And they took me to the front of the park. Then they're like, show her what you do. There's only 13 in the world. We had to fly him in from France. So the man cut out someone's profile with something like this. This is black and white. But I said, I can do that. And they're like, ha, sure. No one can do it. And they threw this stuff at me, and they're like, do me. And they sat there, and I just kind of did something, and they looked at mine and his, and mine and his, and they're like, you're better than him. He's fired. And then that was that. When the scissors were invented, someone decided to cut something out, a profile, and it was a portrait artist. And once they did that, they realized how fast and immediate it was. And there was a French minister of finance named Etienne de Silhouette who realized silhouettes were less costly than a portrait, and so he pushed them and they became the rage, but they were called shades. I feel good that I'm able to give art to people who have zero money or people who have money. I can do it for fundraisers and still be a wife, still be a mother, still do charity work, that I'm able to do it all and have a career and go places with my scissors, and I can go anywhere I want. I'm very happy that I can impact people's lives one silhouette at a time. Art needs to speak to the other person, and if you can do that as an artist, if you can open up somebody's rose-colored glasses and you can make them think, then that's art.
Josie Pace is a relative newcomer on the Detroit, Michigan music scene, but her captivating lyrics, visual artistry, and down-tempo industrial beats are turning some heads. Have a listen.
Have you ever figured out why I've been alone?
Ultimate goal, world domination. I want everyone to like my music.
Have you ever figured out why I wouldn't leave my
I don't want to be known as an acoustic guitar player. Now there's so many people that do acoustic guitar, and it's just not enough for me right now. So I have to like give it something more. I want people to notice it. I've grown a lot since last year from meeting Ken because he knows the ropes. He introduced me to all this different kind of music and this electronic rock bands and stuff, and it really changed the way I thought about how I could write something. So I went from more of these ballads to hardcore, in your face, I'm gonna tell you what I'm gonna say, and you're gonna listen to it and you're gonna like it.
One day she brought in the song Torn, which is our first video, and all of a sudden it was like, boom, here's our sound, here's our thing. We found it, and from there it's been nonstop, just like collaborating, getting stuff done.
Super hardcore music, but the lyrics actually mean something. It's still got a story or a meaning behind the words that I'm singing.
Feel free to care whenever you can. Feel free to hold my hand. I've been waiting here.
We're shooting a video for my song Battleground, and it's pretty fun. I love shooting videos. The song is about someone that I know that has really kind of almost ruined something of mine, and I'm just not very happy about it. And it's about breaking out of what someone else wants to do and just being yourself and showing the world who you are. So performing this is like I'm putting my all into it, giving you every emotion that I have in my body.
Or you'll be underground. It's not going to fit. You're a snake in the grass, and I won't burn down.
We wanted it to be almost punk rock in a sense, even though it's synthesizers and that stuff. And we wanted it to have that feel like it was kind of in your face, but stylistic at the same time.
I definitely love to try to be something else while I'm performing. Try to be someone that people can look at and be like, wow, she's totally crazy or she's totally cool. I just want it to be authentic too.
She surprises me all the time. She's really good. She's real sweet, and you wouldn't expect when we turn on the music, or we're either in the studio or if we're doing a video, she can turn it on.
I want to reach everybody, you know, not just one group, not just, oh, she wears black, she's gonna get the younger kids, the rock and roll kids or whatever. I want people in their older age, like, lots of stuff that I pull from is classic rock, so they would know the references too, so everyone I hope will like it. Anything that I go through, I like to write about because it's personal and I know how to put it into words. But lately I've been getting into more of writing about fictional things, like my song Red Lips Like 10th. I had writer's block, so I had slept in this spare room. I put a sleeping bag on the floor and slept there for a couple days just trying to write a song. And I was going over these scenarios in my head of like, oh, I just robbed a bank and I'm hiding out from the police, or I just assassinated someone and I'm hiding or something. And this song came out.
I've got my gun, I've got my gun.
I write the whole song on the acoustic guitar, and then I bring it to Ken and we work with it. We get the chords laid out and we call it mapping. So we map it out and then we do a rough sing through so he can put it together, and then he plays with it and puts all these new sounds into it and takes the guitar out of it. My music really shows how Detroit is hardworking. I think we have that underground grungy sound to us because we're not getting anything handed to us here. We work so hard to get what we want and what we need. So I feel like Detroit is just making a comeback. I'm trying to get it back on the map.
Touching down in New Orleans now for another of our Louisiana Treasures segments. Jason Weiss of the Historic New Orleans Collection gives us a little of the history behind the statue of Andrew Jackson that gives Jackson Square its name and remains one of the most photographed landmarks in the city.
The Andrew Jackson statue in Jackson Square is among the most iconic of images associated with this city. It's been a longtime fixture of our landscape, of our cityscape. It's been here since February 1856 through countless historical events, hurricanes, Mardi Gras, you name it. It adorns hundreds, if not thousands of postcards. It probably appears in millions, if not hundreds of millions of selfies taken in Jackson Square. We have photographs of this monument going well back into the 19th century, so obviously it was something that people came from far and wide to see. Clark Mills, the sculptor responsible for the Jackson Monument, cast it out of bronze. It was cast in sections and assembled by him in his studio just outside of Washington, and then shipped down here aboard ship from Baltimore, and it arrived in early January of 1856. And the idea was to inaugurate it, to unveil it for the public on January 8th, which of course is the anniversary of the Great Battle of New Orleans. But it arrived too late for that, so they backed it up 1 month to February 9th, 1856. And according to the Picayune newspaper, 60,000 people came to see that unveiling, which was quite a big deal. It may be a slight exaggeration because New Orleans had a population of about 150,000 people at the time, but still quite a considerable crowd. The placement of the statue in Jackson Square goes back to the original purpose of this square, which was, of course, the colonial Place d'Armes. This was where civil and political events would take place. Everything from public markets, executions, proclamations from governing authorities, and also review of citizen militias. And that's where Andrew Jackson comes into this, because in December of 1814, he reviewed the volunteer militia here in the Place d'Armes, which gets renamed Jackson Square in 1851 by a municipal ordinance. Now, the beautification of the square had begun before that, and it was sponsored in part by the Baroness Pontalba, who of course is responsible for the iconic buildings on either side of the square, the Pontalba Apartments. And also around this same time, late 1840s, early 1850s, the St. Louis Cathedral was enlarged and renovated to include its high central tower by an architect named Dupuy. So all of this is coming together at around the same time, and the Jackson statue in 1856 is kind of the finishing touch to what became New Orleans' most important square. Clark Mills had never seen Andrew Jackson. He'd never seen an equestrian statue. He was a self-taught sculptor and metallurgist. He worked out the challenge of getting a horse to stand on just its two hind legs, and no sculptor in history had solved that problem until Clark Mills does it in the early 1850s. The total cost of the monument was about $30,000. Most of that would be the actual casting and erection of the monument. The pedestal, the granite pedestal, was an additional $5,000 that was supplied by a local businessman. There's a motto engraved on the base, "The Union shall and must be preserved." That was not original to it in 1856. It was added by General Benjamin Butler during the federal occupation of the city during the Civil War, as a, sort of an admonishment to the people of New Orleans who had lately turned against the United States and were now being brought back into the fold, so to speak.
And finally, Dayton, Ohio artist John F. Emery draws inspiration from his childhood. As a kid, he loved delving into his grandparents' long-forgotten storage trunks, and the objects and vignettes he found are still inspiring the watercolors he creates on three-dimensional formed paper. Here's how.
You know, you only get to be an artist when you're like Michelangelo, or they're artists. I'm just a painter, working toward maybe being an artist. But yeah, I'm just a painter. I just like old stuff. I'm quite comfortable with it, that yes, I'm nostalgic, and yes, I'm romantic, and I think people who like my work are generally that way also. I remember when computers first came in, I went to a lecture where they talked about you better get on the computer super highway. If you don't, you're going to be left on the back roads. And at that time, I sort of realized the back roads are interesting, the superhighway is not. So I stayed on the back roads, I guess. There's something about physically moving things around on a page which you really don't have that opportunity to do in watercolor. You can do sketches ahead of time or think about where something will go, but once you've painted the rock, it's going to stay there. But if I have a paper rock, then I can shift it around and say, oh, I like this place better, or I don't like a rock at all. In 2000, we had the opportunity to buy an old schoolhouse in New Zealand and have renovated it, and that really started the going back every year for 4 months, and I paint there. Dayton is also just a very easy town to live in, access to all kinds of stuff. Everybody's just sort of very open, and there's a lot of stimulation here. It's a real contrast between where we live in New Zealand. The color is almost always yellow ochre, and here it's green. So, and I also avoid the winter in both places. I'm really keen on collecting art and having a lot of art around, and somebody asked me one time what my definition of art was, and I said, well, it's what people don't throw away. And so in 500 years, you sort of hope that somebody will find something and say, I've always had this and I don't know anything about it. Let's take it to Antiques Roadshow. I don't know. It feels good to have people like your work now and look at it and really have meaning to them and hang it on their wall. But the real goal here is have somebody have it in 500 years. That's what it's all about. I'm making the stuff that I hope gets stuffed into the trunk and rediscovered by somebody else.
And that's going to do it for this edition of Art Rocks. But you can find episodes of the show online at lpb.org/artrocks. And if you can't get enough culture, Country Roads magazine is a great resource for making the most of Louisiana's vibrant cultural events and attractions around town and all across the state. Until next week, I'm James Fox Smith, and thanks for watching.